The wine glass shattered on the sand. It happened so suddenly that everyone at the private beach section froze. The rich young man stood stiff beside the white table, his tailored linen shirt fluttering in the ocean breeze, his eyes locked not on the glamorous woman storming away in heels, but on the poor girl sitting quietly at the table, holding a plastic cup of water with both hands. "Are you serious?" the glamorous woman shouted, her voice slicing through the sound of waves. "You canceled my date for her." People turned, phones came out, a hush fell. The girl at the table looked up slowly, confusion written all over her caramel-toned face. She was only 22, her natural hair packed into a neat bun, her simple floral dress covering her knees. She hadn't ordered the wine. She hadn't ordered anything at all. She was just waiting for her friends. The rich young man didn't flinch. "Yes," he said calmly, "I'm serious." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The glamorous woman laughed sharply, the kind of laugh that hid humiliation. "You don't even know who she is," she snapped. "She doesn't belong here." The young man finally turned his eyes fully to the girl, his voice softened. "I know enough." The girl's lips parted slightly, her heart pounded. Every instinct told her to stand up and run. But she didn't. Because at that moment she realized something had gone terribly wrong, and her quiet life was about to change forever. Just minutes earlier, none of this had existed. The beach had been loud with laughter, music, and splashing water. The sun sat high, reflecting off the Atlantic waves like scattered gold. Groups of friends filled the public section of the beach, but beyond a rope barrier lay a more polished space, white umbrellas, reserved tables, chilled drinks, and staff moving with practiced ease. That morning the girl, her name was Aaliyah, almost didn't come. Aaliyah lived with her aunt on the edge of the city. Money was always tight, her clothes were simple, her phone old, her dreams often postponed, but she was brilliant, modest, and observant. She noticed things others ignored, she listened more than she spoke, and she carried herself with a quiet dignity that came from knowing hardship too well. Her friends had begged her all week. "Come on, Ali," her best friend Tasha had said. "Just one day, no stress, no thinking." Aaliyah hesitated. "That beach is expensive." "We're not paying for the fancy side," Tasha laughed. "Just the regular area, trust me." So Aaliyah agreed. When they arrived, the heat was heavy, the air thick with salt. Music thumped from nearby speakers. Children ran past with buckets and towels. Aaliyah removed her sandals and let the sand sink between her toes. For a moment, she smiled. Her friends rushed toward the swimming pool area, squealing and laughing, promising to be back quickly. "I'll wait here," Aaliyah said, scanning for a shaded spot. She walked a little farther than she should have. The rope barrier wasn't obvious. One moment she was in the public area, the next she was standing near a small white table with two empty chairs and a folded reservation card. She didn't notice it. All she saw was shade. She sat down carefully, smoothing her dress, placing her small bag at her feet. She kept her eyes on the ocean, lost in thought. She didn't touch anything on the table except a plastic cup of water already there. That table, however, had been reserved. Miles away in a luxury apartment overlooking the city, a man named Julian Brooks had been staring at his reflection, adjusting his watch for the third time. Julian was young, rich, and tired of disappointment. At 28, he had built a reputation in business that made older men uneasy. Smart investments, calm confidence, and an ability to read people quickly. But when it came to relationships, things were different. Every woman introduced to him seemed to see only his wealth. That afternoon's blind date had been arranged by a family friend. The woman was described as perfect, beautiful, polished, from a good family. Julian wasn't excited, he was curious at best. When he arrived at the beach's private section, staff greeted him by name. He walked toward the reserved table, rehearsing polite conversation in his head. Then he stopped. Someone was already sitting there. At first, irritation flickered across his face. But as he drew closer, that irritation faded into something else entirely. The girl wasn't scrolling on her phone, she wasn't posing, she wasn't calling for service. She was watching the ocean. There was a stillness about her, a calm that didn't beg for attention. Julian slowed his steps. Aaliyah sensed someone nearby and looked up. Their eyes met. For a brief second, the noise of the beach seemed to disappear. Julian noticed everything at once: the natural bun, the modest dress, the intelligence in her eyes, the way she sat like she didn't need to prove anything. "You're early," he said, unsure why his voice sounded different. Aaliyah frowned slightly. "I'm sorry. This table," he gestured, "it's reserved." Her face drained of color. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry," she said quickly, already gathering her bag. "I didn't realize, I was just waiting for my friends, I'll move." Something in her tone stopped him. "Wait," Julian said. She paused, halfway standing. "Are you meeting someone?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, I was just resting." He nodded slowly, then surprised himself. "It's fine," he said, "you can stay for a bit." Aaliyah blinked. "I don't want to cause trouble." "You're not." Before either of them could say more, a woman approached confidently from behind Julian. She wore designer sunglasses, a fitted dress, and heels that sank slightly into the sand. "There you are," she said brightly, then stopped when she saw Aaliyah. "Who is this?" Julian turned. "This," he said after a pause, "is Aaliyah." The woman's smile faded. "And I am your date." Julian looked back at Aaliyah. In that moment, a decision formed, quiet, sudden, and irreversible. And when the wine glass shattered on the sand minutes later, everyone realized something extraordinary had just begun. But Aaliyah had no idea how dangerous, beautiful, and life-altering that decision would become. The ocean breeze picked up, and Julian reached for the empty chair across from her. Just as the woman turned back with a furious look that promised trouble. The glamorous woman did not leave quietly. Her heels sank into the sand as she spun back toward the table, her perfectly shaped eyebrows pulled tight with anger. People nearby pretended not to stare, but everyone was watching. Moments like this were rare, especially in the private section of the beach where money usually decided everything. "So this is how it's going to be," she said, folding her arms. "You embarrass me in public for a stranger." Julian didn't raise his voice, he didn't argue. He simply looked at her with the same calm expression he used in boardrooms when deals collapsed. "I didn't embarrass you," he replied. "I made a choice." The woman scoffed, "Because she sat at the wrong table." "No," Julian said honestly, "because she's real." Aaliyah's chest tightened. She wanted the sand to swallow her whole. "I really didn't mean for any of this," she said softly, standing up at last. "I'll just go, I'm sorry." Julian turned to her immediately. "You don't need to apologize." But she was already stepping back, her hands shaking slightly. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, especially not in a place where she clearly didn't belong. She glanced toward the pool area, hoping to see her friends waving, but they were nowhere in sight. The glamorous woman laughed again, sharp and bitter. "Let her go then, you'll regret this." She picked up her bag and walked away, head held high, but the humiliation followed her like a shadow. When she was gone, the beach slowly returned to its noise, though whispers lingered. Julian exhaled slowly and turned back to Aaliyah. "Please," he said, "sit." Aaliyah hesitated. Every lesson she had learned growing up told her to avoid trouble, avoid rich men, avoid situations that felt too good to be true. But something in Julian's eyes wasn't mocking or pitying. It was curious, respectful. She sat back down carefully. "I'm Julian," he said, extending his hand. "Aaliyah," she replied, shaking it gently. Their hands touched briefly, but the contact felt heavier than it should have. "I didn't plan this," Julian admitted, "but I'm glad it happened." She gave a small, nervous smile. "I think your date would disagree." "She'll survive," he said. I've been on dates that felt like business meetings, this doesn't. Aaliyah laughed quietly before she could stop herself. That's honest. They talked slowly at first, simple things, where they were from, what brought them to the beach. Aaliyah spoke about her aunt, her small job at a local bookstore, her love for reading and solving problems. She didn't complain, she didn't exaggerate, she just spoke the truth. Julian listened, really listened. He told her about growing up with a single mother, how money came later, how loneliness sometimes followed success. He didn't mention his full net worth, he didn't brag. For once, he felt no need to impress. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. When her friends finally returned, dripping wet and laughing, they froze when they saw Aaliyah sitting at a white table with a well-dressed man. Tasha's eyes widened, she nudged the others. Ali, who is that? Aaliyah stood quickly. Guys, this is Julian, I accidentally sat at his table. Julian smiled politely. Nice to meet you. Her friend smiled back, a little too enthusiastically. You didn't tell us you were meeting someone, Tasha teased. I wasn't, Aaliyah said honestly. Julian chuckled, neither was I, not like this. There was an awkward pause, then Julian surprised everyone again. Would you all like drinks, he asked, on me. Her friends exchanged looks. Aaliyah opened her mouth to refuse, but Tasha elbowed her gently. It's okay, Ali. They stayed a while longer. Laughter replaced tension. Julian noticed how Aaliyah checked on her friends, how she made sure everyone felt included. She wasn't dazzled by the setting, she was grounded. As the sun began to set, painting the sky orange and purple, Julian turned to her. I'd like to see you again, he said simply. Her heart skipped. I don't really go to places like this. That's fine, he replied. We'll go somewhere else, somewhere normal. She studied his face, searching for hidden intentions. She found none. Okay, she said at last. They exchanged numbers. When Julian left, Aaliyah's friends erupted. Do you know how rich he looked? One whispered. He canceled a date for you, another said. Aaliyah smiled, but unease crept in. That night, lying on her small bed, she stared at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed. A message from Julian. I had a good time today, I hope you got home safe. She replied after a moment. I did, thank you, today was unexpected. He responded almost immediately. Sometimes the wrong table leads to the right place. Aaliyah smiled softly, then her smile faded. Because she didn't know yet that Julian's world came with rules, enemies, and expectations. And that someone else had also noticed her that day. From a distance. Watching. And already planning how to remove her from the picture. The first date did not happen at the beach again. Julian chose a small, quiet restaurant tucked away from the city lights. No flashing signs, no velvet ropes, just soft music, warm lighting, and food that smelled like home. When Aaliyah arrived, she almost turned back. She stood outside for a full minute, adjusting her simple dress, her heart racing. Places like this still felt expensive to her, even when they were modest by other standards. Then Julian stepped outside. You made it, he said, smiling like he had been waiting all day. I almost didn't, she admitted. I'm glad you did. Inside, they sat by a window. The conversation flowed easier than before. They laughed, they shared stories. Julian noticed how Aaliyah thanked the waiter politely, how she listened carefully, how she didn't pretend to be anyone else. Aaliyah noticed how Julian asked questions and waited for real answers, how he didn't check his phone every minute, how he looked at her like she mattered. By the end of the night, something unspoken had formed between them. But outside that quiet bubble, another story was unfolding. The glamorous woman from the beach, her name was Vanessa, sat in her luxury apartment, scrolling angrily through social media. She replayed the humiliation again and again in her mind. She had been promised Julian, introduced to his circle, told she was perfect for him. And then a poor girl in a simple dress took her place. Vanessa's pride burned. She made a call. Find out who she is, Vanessa said coldly. Everything. Back at home, Aaliyah lay awake, staring at her phone. Julian had texted her goodnight. She smiled, then sighed. Her aunt noticed the change almost immediately. You're smiling too much, her aunt said the next morning. What's going on? Aaliyah hesitated, then told her everything carefully. Her aunt listened quietly, then shook her head. Be careful, my dear, rich men come with storms. I know, Aaliyah said, but he feels different. Days passed. Julian and Aaliyah spent more time together, walks, coffee, long conversations. He never rushed her, never crossed boundaries. He admired her mind more than her beauty, though both were impossible to ignore. But the whispers followed. Some people stared when they were together, others smiled fake smiles. Aaliyah felt it but tried to ignore it. One afternoon, Julian invited her to a charity event. Her heart sank. I don't think I belong there. You belong wherever you choose to stand, he said gently. She agreed nervously. The event was elegant, dresses shimmered, cameras flashed. Aaliyah felt small in her modest outfit, but she stood tall. That's when Vanessa appeared. Her eyes locked onto Aaliyah with a smile that held no warmth. So, Vanessa said, stepping closer, you're still here. Julian stiffened. Vanessa, this isn't. Oh, it's fine, Vanessa interrupted. I just wanted to say hello and warn you. Aaliyah frowned. Warn me. Vanessa leaned closer, lowering her voice. Men like Julian don't change worlds for girls like you. Enjoy it while it lasts. She walked away. Aaliyah's hands trembled. Julian turned to her. Don't listen to her. But doubt had already slipped in. That night, Aaliyah cried quietly in her room, not because of Vanessa's words alone, but because a part of her feared they might be true. The next morning, everything changed. Aaliyah arrived at work to find her boss waiting. There's a rumor going around, he said uncomfortably, about you and a wealthy man. Her stomach dropped. They're saying things, he continued, untrue things, but it's affecting the business. She understood. She packed her things and left. By evening, the story had spread online, photos from the beach, from the event, comments filled with judgment. Julian called immediately. I'll fix this, he said. But Aaliyah's voice was quiet. I don't want you to fight everyone for me. I don't care what it takes, Julian replied. I'm not losing you. She looked out her window at the dark sky. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to stay. But she didn't know yet how deep the storm would go. And somewhere across the city, Vanessa smiled at her phone. Because the trap had been set. Aaliyah did not answer Julian's calls that night. She lay on her bed with her phone face down beside her, staring at the ceiling as shadows from passing cars slid across the walls. Her chest felt tight, as if the air itself had grown heavier. Losing her job hurt, but what frightened her more was how quickly her life had become public gossip. By morning, messages filled her phone, some from friends checking in, others from strangers she didn't know asking questions that made her stomach turn. A few were cruel, accusing her of things she had never done. She turned the phone off. Julian, on the other hand, did not slow down. By mid-morning, his team had traced the source of the online rumors, fake accounts, carefully timed posts, photos taken from angles meant to suggest intimacy that never existed. Vanessa's name did not appear anywhere, but Julian recognized her signature immediately. She had always been calculated, never careless. She crossed a line, his assistant said cautiously. Julian's jaw tightened. She crossed several. But anger was not his biggest fear, losing Aaliyah was. When he finally reached her aunt's house that evening, the sky was already dark. He stood outside the gate for a long moment, unsure if she would even come out. He knocked gently. Aaliyah's aunt answered first. She studied Julian carefully, her expression unreadable. She's inside, the woman said, but if you hurt her, no amount of money will save you. I understand, Julian replied quietly. Aaliyah appeared at the doorway. Her eyes were tired, her face bare, her natural buns slightly loose. Seeing her like that made something twist in his chest. "I didn't want to ignore you," she said before he could speak. "I just needed quiet." "I know," he said, "and I'm sorry you're dealing with this." They sat on the small porch, side by side, leaving a careful space between them. Crickets chirped in the distance. "I lost my job," Elias said simply. Julian's breath caught. "I'll help you find something else." "That's not the point," she replied gently. "I don't want my life to depend on you fixing things." He nodded slowly. "Then let me stand beside you while you fix them." She looked at him, then really looked at him. "This world you live in, it's loud, it's dangerous. I didn't ask for it." "I know," Julian said, "but I'm asking you to stay." Silence stretched between them. Finally she spoke. "I'll stay, but I won't hide and I won't pretend." Relief washed over Julian's face. "That's all I want." For a brief moment peace returned. But Vanessa was not done. 2 days later, Julian received an invitation he couldn't ignore: his mother's annual family gathering. Investors, old friends, powerful people. And Vanessa would be there. Julian debated not attending, but absence would raise questions. Instead, he made a decision. He invited Aaliyah. When he told her, her first reaction was fear. "They will tear me apart," she said. "They'll try," he replied, "but they won't succeed." The night of the gathering, Aaliyah stood in front of her mirror, smoothing a simple but elegant dress borrowed from a friend. She took a deep breath, reminding herself who she was before any of this began. Brilliant, modest, grounded. The mansion buzzed with conversation and soft music. As Julian and Aaliyah entered together, heads turned, whispers followed, some curious, some judgmental. Julian's mother approached them almost immediately. She studied Aaliyah closely, then smiled, slow, deliberate. "So this is the young woman everyone is talking about," she said. "Yes," Julian replied, "this is Aaliyah." The woman extended her hand. "Welcome." Aaliyah shook it, surprised by the warmth. But across the room, Vanessa watched with narrowed eyes. When the moment came, she struck. Midway through the evening, as guests gathered near the balcony, Vanessa stepped forward with a glass raised. "I just want to say," she began sweetly, "how inspiring it is to see Julian supporting community outreach so personally." A few people laughed politely. Vanessa turned her gaze to Aaliyah. "It's wonderful when people remember their roots." The implication hung in the air. Aaliyah felt the sting, but she didn't lower her eyes. "I'm proud of my roots," she said calmly. "They taught me integrity." The room fell silent. Julian's mother smiled again, this time with approval. Vanessa's lips tightened. That should have been the end. But later that night, a man approached Aaliyah quietly. "You should know," he said under his breath, "there are people digging into your past, looking for something ugly." Aaliyah's heart raced. Why? Because some people can't stand seeing someone rise without permission. Across the room, Vanessa watched, her smile returning. Aaliyah realized then that surviving this would take more than love. It would take strength she hadn't yet discovered. And the hardest test was still coming. The digging began quietly. At first, Aaliyah noticed small things: a stranger lingering too long outside her aunt's gate, anonymous messages that said nothing directly but hinted at shame, secrets, and exposure, old classmates she hadn't spoken to in years suddenly viewing her social media stories. She told herself not to panic. "There's nothing to find," her aunt reminded her. "Truth does not fear light." But truth could still be twisted. Julian increased security around her without announcing it. A car nearby when she went out, a driver who appeared by coincidence. He didn't want her to feel caged, but he refused to leave her unprotected. One evening, Julian arrived at her aunt's house looking unusually tense. "They're trying to paint a story," he said, "not about money, about character." Aaliyah felt a chill. "How?" "Old photos, old rumors, anyone who ever disliked you." She shook her head slowly. I've lived quietly, school, work, home. That's what scares them, Julian said. There's no dirt, so they're trying to create it. The attack came 2 days later. A blog post surfaced claiming Aaliyah had deliberately targeted wealthy men before. It used vague language, unnamed sources, and blurred photos taken years ago at public events she had attended with friends. The headline was cruel, designed to humiliate. Julian's name was mentioned, just enough to connect him to the scandal. By morning, the post had spread. Aaliyah didn't leave her room. She sat on the bed, knees pulled to her chest, reading comments that made her feel smaller with every word. People who had never met her called her desperate, calculated, fake. Her phone rang again and again. Julian finally came over and found her like that. "This isn't you," he said firmly, kneeling in front of her, "and it won't define you." She looked up at him, eyes red. "I didn't choose this life, but it keeps choosing me." He took her hands, "Then let me choose you publicly." The next day, Julian did something no one expected. He held a press conference. His advisors warned him, his friends questioned him, but Julian stood in front of cameras with calm resolve. "I want to be clear," he said. "The woman you are attacking is someone I respect, someone honest, someone who has done nothing wrong." He paused, letting the words settle. "And if standing beside her costs me favor, deals, or comfort, so be it." The statement shook the city. Vanessa watched the broadcast from her apartment, her nails digging into her palm. She hadn't expected Julian to go that far. Men like him usually protected their image first. She made another call. "If the soft approach failed," she said coldly, "then we go harder." That evening, Aaliyah's aunt collapsed. It happened suddenly. One moment she was standing in the kitchen, the next she was on the floor, clutching her chest. Aaliyah screamed for help as neighbors rushed in. At the hospital, doctors spoke in low voices. Stress, they said, high blood pressure. The emotional strain had taken its toll. Aaliyah sat by the bed all night, holding her aunt's hand, guilt weighing heavily on her heart. "This is my fault," she whispered. Her aunt opened her eyes weakly. "No, this is fear trying to chase you back into the shadows." Julian arrived quietly and stayed without speaking much. He didn't bring flowers or promises, just presence. In the hospital hallway, Aaliyah finally broke. "I can't keep hurting people I love," she said. "Maybe walking away is the only way to end this." Julian's face tightened. "That's exactly what they want." "But what if they never stop?" she asked. He didn't have an answer. Because that night another message arrived, this one anonymous, this one direct. "Leave him, or the next person you love won't be so lucky." Aaliyah stared at the screen, her hands shaking. For the first time since the beach, fear outweighed hope. And she realized that love had pulled her into a war she never agreed to fight. Aaliyah did not tell Julian about the message immediately. She deleted it, then restored it, then deleted it again, as if removing it from her phone could remove it from her mind. The words stayed anyway, echoing in her thoughts while machines beeped softly beside her aunt's hospital bed. The doctors said her aunt would recover, but slowly. Stress had done damage that rest alone could not quickly undo. That night, Aaliyah sat alone in the hospital corridor, watching nurses move past with tired eyes. She felt smaller than she had felt in years, not poor small, like her existence had become a problem that needed solving. When Julian returned the next morning, he found her staring out the window. "You didn't sleep," he said. She shook her head. "Neither did you." He sat beside her. "Talk to me." She hesitated, then finally showed him the message. Julian read it once, then again. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed controlled. "This isn't just intimidation anymore." "No," Aaliyah said quietly, "this is danger." "I'll increase security," he said immediately. "I'll involve people who can trace this." She placed a hand on his arm. "Julian, what if protecting me keeps hurting everyone else?" He looked at her sharply. "You are not the problem." But I'm the target, she replied. Silence followed. That afternoon, Julian's mother asked to see Aaliyah. The request alone made Aaliyah nervous. Powerful women often came with hidden judgments even when they smiled. Still, she agreed. They met in a quiet sitting room at the mansion. Sunlight streamed through tall windows. Julian's mother poured tea herself. You've been very brave, the woman said after a moment. Braver than most people raised with far more comfort than you. Aaliyah lowered her eyes respectfully. I never meant to bring trouble. Trouble does not need invitations, the woman replied. It only needs insecurity. She studied Aaliyah carefully. Some people believe status is inherited, others believe it can be earned. You make people uncomfortable because you don't chase what they guard. Aaliyah swallowed. I just want peace. And Julian wants truth, the woman said gently. Unfortunately, truth threatens those who live behind masks. She leaned forward. I won't lie to you, this will get worse before it gets better. Aaliyah nodded slowly. Then why allow it? Because, Julian's mother said calmly, running teaches enemies that fear works. That evening, Vanessa made her boldest move yet. A former friend of Aaliyah's, someone she had trusted years ago, appeared on a small online show. The woman spoke carefully, emotionally, hinting that Aaliyah had always been ambitious and strategic. She didn't lie outright, she twisted the truth just enough. The clip went viral. Aaliyah watched it alone, tears streaming silently down her face. Julian stormed into the room moments later. I'm shutting this down. How? Aaliyah asked. You can't silence the internet. No, he said, but I can expose the puppet master. He turned to his team. Release everything. Within hours, documents surfaced, messages, call records, payments traced through intermediaries, not enough to arrest but enough to reveal pattern. Vanessa's name finally appeared. The internet shifted. People questioned, debated, took sides. Vanessa went quiet. Too quiet. That night, Aaliyah received a call from an unknown number. She answered against her better judgment. You should have left when you had the chance, Vanessa's voice said smoothly. Now everyone loses. The line went dead. Aaliyah felt something settle inside her, not fear this time but clarity. She called Julian. I'm done hiding, she said. Whatever comes next, I'll face it standing. Julian closed his eyes briefly. Then I'll stand with you. But neither of them knew that Vanessa had already planned one final move, one that didn't involve rumors or screens. Something physical. Something irreversible. And as Aaliyah fell asleep that night for the first time in days, danger moved closer than ever before. The day everything almost fell apart began quietly. Too quietly. Aaliyah woke up before dawn, the city still wrapped in gray light. For the first time in weeks, she felt calm, not because the danger had passed, but because she had made a decision. Fear no longer controlled her. Whatever was coming, she would meet it with open eyes. Julian insisted on driving her himself that morning. She was scheduled to speak at a small community youth forum, something she had agreed to long before the chaos began. The organizers had asked her to talk about resilience and education, unaware of how closely those words now clung to her life. As they drove, Aaliyah watched the city slide by. You don't have to do this today, Julian said quietly. We can cancel. She shook her head. If I cancel now, I'll cancel forever. He nodded, respecting her resolve. The venue was modest, folding chairs, a small stage, teenagers murmuring among themselves. When Aaliyah walked in, some faces lit up with recognition, others looked curious, unsure. Julian stayed near the entrance, watching everything. Aaliyah stepped onto the stage and took a breath. I wasn't born into comfort, she began, and I didn't plan to be in the spotlight, but life doesn't ask permission before it tests you. As she spoke, her voice steadied. She talked about choices, about dignity, about refusing to become bitter when the world misunderstands you. The room grew quiet. The teenagers listened. In the back row, a man lowered his cap slightly and checked his phone. When Aaliyah finished, the applause surprised her. It was warm, genuine. She smiled, relief flooding her chest. That was when the fire alarm went off. At first, people laughed nervously, then smoke appeared near one of the exits. "Everyone stay calm," a staff member shouted. "Please move outside in an orderly manner." Julian's instincts screamed. He pushed forward, scanning the room until he found Aaliyah. Their eyes met across the crowd. "Stay where you are," he mouthed. But panic had already begun to spread. Chairs scraped, voices rose. Then Julian saw it. A man moving against the flow, too deliberate, too calm. The man reached into his jacket. Julian ran. "Aaliyah!" The shout cut through the chaos. She turned just as the man lunged, not with a weapon but with force, grabbing her arm hard enough to pull her backward. She screamed. Julian tackled the man before anyone else could react. They crashed to the floor. The crowd scattered. Security rushed in. Someone shouted for the police. As the man was restrained, his phone slid across the floor. A message glowed on the screen. "Make it look like an accident." Aaliyah collapsed into a chair, shaking violently. Julian rushed to her side, wrapping his arms around her as sirens wailed outside. She was safe. Barely. At the police station, everything unraveled quickly. The man confessed he hadn't planned to kill her, just scare her badly enough to make her disappear. He named the person who hired him. Vanessa. This time there were no intermediaries, no shadows. Enough evidence existed for an arrest. Vanessa was taken into custody that evening, her perfect image finally shattered. Cameras captured her being escorted out of her building, sunglasses gone, face pale. The city exploded with reaction. Support flooded in for Aaliyah, messages of apology, of admiration, of outrage on her behalf. But Aaliyah felt hollow. That night she sat alone in Julian's living room, staring at the city lights through the window. Julian joined her quietly. "You almost died today." She nodded, and somehow I feel more alive than ever. He sat beside her. "I won't blame you if you walk away now, anyone would understand." She turned to him slowly. "I won't let fear decide my future, not anymore." Tears filled his eyes. "I love you." She held his gaze. "Then love me in the light, not as a secret, not as a scandal, as a choice." He took her hand, "Always." But even as peace seemed close, Aaliyah knew one final thing remained. Healing. And choosing what kind of life she would build from the ashes. The beach felt like a lifetime ago. The wrong table had led her here. And tomorrow she would decide what the right life truly meant. The ocean was calm the day Aaliyah returned to the beach. Not the private section, not the place of white tables and whispered judgments, just the open shore where children ran freely and vendors called out over the wind. The same sea, but a different meaning. She stood barefoot in the sand, her natural bun loose now, the breeze brushing strands across her face. Julian stood beside her, silent, respectful, letting her take the moment in fully. "I never thought I'd come back here," she said quietly. Julian followed her gaze to the water. "Sometimes the place that breaks you is also the place that reminds you who you are." Aaliyah nodded. Weeks had passed since Vanessa's arrest. The legal process moved forward steadily. There were headlines, debates, and opinions, but the noise no longer shook her. The truth had settled where lies once screamed. Her aunt had recovered enough to return home, stronger in spirit if not yet in body. Neighbors stopped by with food and kind words. The same community that had once watched in silence now stood openly with her. Aaliyah had found work again, this time at a nonprofit education center, helping young people from backgrounds like hers find scholarships, mentors, and confidence. She didn't announce it online. She didn't need applause. She felt whole. Julian, true to his word, did not try to control the narrative of her life. He stood beside her in public and in private, never ahead, never above. When reporters asked about her, he redirected questions toward her achievements, not their relationship. One afternoon, months after the chaos, Julian invited Aaliyah to dinner at his mother's home. This time there were no whispers. Julian's mother embraced her warmly. "You endured fire," the woman said, "and you didn't burn others to survive." Aaliyah smiled softly. "I had help." "Yes," the woman agreed, "but courage was yours." Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, Julian led Aaliyah to the garden. "I have something to ask you," he said. She raised an eyebrow lightly. "That sounds serious." "It is," he said, then took a breath. "Not because I want to own your future, but because I want to build one with you." He didn't kneel, he didn't present anything extravagant. He simply took her hands. "I love who you were before me," he continued, "and who you became despite everything around us. Will you choose me not because I can change your life, but because we make each other better?" Aaliyah felt tears rise, not from shock but from certainty. "Yes," she said. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just honestly. Their relationship did not turn into a fairy tale overnight. There were adjustments, boundaries, conversations about power, independence, and identity. Aaliyah refused to disappear into Julian's world. Julian refused to let the world shrink her. Together, they created something new. Aaliyah began speaking publicly not about scandal but about dignity, about how brilliance does not need wealth to be valid, about how modesty is not weakness, about how sitting at the wrong table does not make you wrong. At one event, a young girl approached her shyly. "I look like you," the girl said, "and people say girls like us shouldn't dream too big." Aaliyah knelt and met her eyes. "They're wrong." The crowd applauded not because of Julian, not because of wealth, but because truth resonates. Months later, Julian and Aaliyah returned once more to the beach, not to relive the past, but to close it. They sat at a simple table near the shore, no reservation card, no staff hovering. Aaliyah smiled to herself. One wrong seat. One unexpected meeting. One choice that revealed character over comfort. Her life had not been transformed because a rich man chose her. It had been transformed because she chose herself, and someone else chose to honor that. And as the sun dipped into the sea, Aaliyah knew one thing clearly. Destiny doesn't always knock. Sometimes it waits quietly at the wrong table until courage sits down.